8 weeks before she died, Joni Lamb signed a legal document that removed her husband's name from a $2.9 million beachfront condominium in Florida. She did it quietly, without announcement, through routine public records channels. And Doug Weiss had to agree to it, because a quitclaim deed requires the signature of both parties. He signed away his own interest in a multimillion-dollar property he had co-owned for less than 2 years. That is not a footnote to this story. That is the story. The deed itself. Let's start with what the document actually says and what it actually means, before layering in the context. A quitclaim deed is a specific legal instrument. Unlike a warranty deed, which comes with guarantees about clear title and ownership history, a quitclaim deed simply transfers whatever interest the grantor currently holds. No warranties. No guarantees. Just a transfer of whatever rights exist. It is direct, clean, and immediate. In March 2026, Joni Lamb signed a quitclaim deed on the Miramar Beach condominium in Walton County, Florida. The property had been purchased in September 2023, just a few months after her June 2023 marriage to Doug Weiss, for approximately $2.9 million. It was a Gulfront property, jointly titled in both their names from the moment of purchase. That joint ownership reflected the ordinary expectation of a married couple buying a home together. It also, technically, gave Weiss a legal interest in a multi-million-dollar asset. The March 2026 deed changed that. Ownership was consolidated into Joni's personal revocable trust. Doug Weiss's name came off the title. His interest, whatever rights he held as a joint owner, were quitclaimed away. And critically, he agreed to it. His signature was required for the transfer to be valid. Joni died on May 7, 2026. The deed was signed approximately 8 weeks before that. What a revocable trust does, and what this one did. A revocable trust is a standard estate planning tool. Its primary function is to hold assets during a person's lifetime in a way that bypasses probate, the often lengthy and expensive court process of validating a will and distributing assets after death. Assets held in a properly funded revocable trust pass directly to the named beneficiaries according to the trust's terms, without the delay, publicity, and cost of probate proceedings. If you are facing a terminal illness and you want your affairs in order before you die, moving assets into a revocable trust is a rational and prudent thing to do. The Christian Post confirmed that in her final year, Joni Lamb sold 3 homes and moved 4 properties into a revocable trust. The Tarrant County Appraisal District shows her Colleyville, Texas primary residence titled in the Revocable Trust of Joni Lamb. This was not an isolated move. It was part of a systematic, documented process of estate restructuring. But here's where the quitclaim deed diverges from routine estate planning. Transferring property you hold in your own name into your own trust does not require removing your spouse from the title first. If you want your spouse to eventually inherit the property, you simply name them as a beneficiary of the trust. The asset transfers smoothly at death, probate is avoided, and the spouse receives the property as intended. The active step of removing Doug Weiss's name before placing the property in trust was not required by the mechanics of estate planning. It was a choice. A deliberate, documented, legally executed choice, made by a woman with decades of experience managing a complex ministry empire, who understood exactly what she was signing. Who Doug Weiss is, the full record. To understand why that choice matters, you need to understand who Doug Weiss is. Not the version he presented on Daystar, but the version the documented record shows. Doug Weiss is a licensed psychologist based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, holding license number 3199 according to the Psychology Today registry. He founded Heart to Heart Counseling Center, which offers multi-day intensive retreats for couples dealing with sex addiction, infidelity, and what Weiss branded as intimacy anorexia, a term describing the emotional and physical withdrawal of one spouse within a marriage. He authored more than 40 books on these subjects and built a reputation as an authority figure within faith-based communities over several decades. His credentials, however, became a documented point of controversy long before the Daystar scandal. In November 2002, the Colorado State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners issued a formal letter of admonition to Weiss. The finding: he had misrepresented his credentials by referring to himself as a licensed marriage and family therapist, a professionally protected title requiring a specific license he did not hold. He was licensed as a professional counselor. He was not licensed as a marriage and family therapist. This is a matter of official public record. In 2010, the state of Colorado's boards of psychologist and licensed professional counselor examiners issued a second formal action against him, a final agency order. The case stemmed from a 3-day intensive attended by a married couple in 2008. The board's language was specific and damning. Rather than assessing the situation, de-escalating conflict, and implementing therapeutic interventions, Weiss had, in the board's words, become an executioner of the marriage, rushing the couple into discussions about ending the relationship, distributing marital assets, and moving on with their lives. He had clients write anger letters, goodbye letters to their dreams, and goodbye letters to each other. The board found he had failed to implement appropriate therapeutic interventions. Weiss accepted and agreed to the order on November 23, 2010. Beyond the licensing record, the Roy's report interviewed 7 former female clients of Heart to Heart who described intensive retreats costing between $4,000 and nearly $15,000. Their accounts were consistent and deeply troubling. Polygraph tests administered using non-standard techniques that expert polygraph examiners said were statistically unreliable, women being shamed for organic emotional reactions when learning of their husband's betrayals, immediate pressure to resume sexual intimacy following a past polygraph, regardless of the wife's readiness, and a pattern of labeling resistant wives as intimacy anorexics, a diagnosis that was then weaponized against them by their husbands. The polygraph examiner at the facility's affiliate operation was Weiss's own son-in-law. The company's polygraph operation was not a member of the Colorado Association of Polygraph Examiners. One former client, Sonia Berry Pruitt, put it plainly, "You're not going to go see a sex addiction therapist for an intensive if he's divorcing his wife. You would want your money back, because that's fraudulent." Which brings us to the divorce. The timeline that cannot be ignored. Marcus Lamb died on November 30, 2021, at age 64, following hospitalization for COVID-19. 58 days later, on January 27, 2022, Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years. Court records document this precisely. His divorce was finalized in May 2022. He did not publicly announce the divorce until February 8, 2023, nearly a year after filing, and 8 months after it was finalized. During that entire period, he continued counseling clients about marriage fidelity, emotional healing, and sexual integrity. He continued presenting, in client sessions and online, as a happily married man. Former clients who attended heart-to-heart intensives during this period described learning of the divorce afterward as a second betrayal, one that called into question everything they had been told. By August 2022, Weiss and Joni Lamb had begun a public courtship. By March 2023, he had proposed. They married on June 10, 2023, 18 months after Marcus Lamb's death, and the same month Weiss's divorce became publicly known. Joni's children, Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, did not attend the wedding. Upon marriage, Doug Weiss began receiving a 6-figure Daystar salary. According to Jonathan Lamb, who disclosed the internal compensation document to the Roy's report, Weiss's official title at Daystar was consultant. The full amount of his compensation was concealed from Jonathan, on Joni's explicit instructions. The same internal document that revealed Joni's own salary had jumped 140% upon Marcus's death, rising from $436,750 in 2021 to $1,048,200 in 2022, also showed that access to Weiss's salary information was specifically restricted. To be clear on those figures, an internal Daystar document obtained by the Roy's report, titled Final Salary Review for 2023, shows Joni Lamb's total compensation in 2022 at $1,048,200, more than 3 times the compensation of the next highest-paid employee, CFO Arnold Torres, who made $300,000. Daystar disputed this figure publicly, but Jonathan Lamb stated the 2022 amounts were verified, not proposed. Daystar claimed all executive salaries were set by an independent compensation firm, but Jonathan confirmed that in practice, salaries were set by Marcus and Joni, and later by Joni alone. In September 2023, 3 months after the wedding, Joni and Doug jointly purchased the Miramar Beach condominium for approximately $2.9 million. This purchase was preceded and accompanied by an extraordinary volume of Daystar jet activity. Trinity Foundation analysis of Daystar's Gulfstream GV, tail number N279PH, documented 24 round-trip flights between Fort Worth and Colorado Springs, where Weiss lived, and 13 round-trip flights between Fort Worth and the Miramar Beach area, all within an approximately 18-month window. The estimated cost of those flights was $769,220. The jet's final recorded flight was on September 29, 2025, to San Diego, the American city nearest to Oasis of Hope Hospital in Tijuana, Mexico. After that flight, the jet was sold. No public announcement was made. The prenup detail the record raises. One additional documented element complicates the picture significantly. According to Jonathan Lamb, Joni told both him and Susie that Doug Weiss had signed a prenuptial agreement and would never hold a leadership position at Daystar. Joni used the prenup as a reassurance, proof that the marriage would not threaten the network's future or the family's inheritance. But Trinity Foundation, which has extensively examined Daystar's property and financial records, noted that public documents raise questions about the prenup's terms and enforcement. The quitclaim deed itself, requiring Weiss to voluntarily relinquish his co-ownership interest in a $2.9 million property, may suggest that the prenup, whatever its original terms, was being actively reinforced in Joni's final months. Or it may suggest that the prenup had not been sufficient to prevent joint ownership from being established in the first place, necessitating a legal correction. What the public record cannot tell us is exactly what the prenup said when it was signed, or whether its terms were ever contested. What the public record does tell us is that Joni removed Doug's name from the most substantial jointly held property in her estate roughly 8 weeks before her death, and that he agreed to that removal. The family context that makes this legible. No financial or legal document exists in a vacuum. To understand what Joni Lamb was doing in March 2026, you have to understand what her family looked like from the inside. Jonathan Lamb had been fired from Daystar in November 2024, after a 15-month deterioration in his relationship with his mother. The precipitating cause, in Jonathan and Susie's account, was their refusal to publicly read a viewer comment endorsing Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss on air, a refusal rooted in their biblical conviction that Weiss had divorced without biblical grounds. What followed that refusal was documented in extraordinary detail. Surveillance, GPS tracking of Jonathan's company vehicle by Daystar's head of security, a private investigator following the couple with their children present, a board meeting where Jonathan was pressured for hours to sign an NDA under threat of termination, a 40% salary cut, the firing of Susie and her parents who also worked at Daystar, and ultimately his formal termination, delivered on a Saturday by a security officer carrying a gun and wearing a bulletproof vest. Jonathan was not told his mother was near death. He was not called to her bedside. He learned of her death approximately 10 minutes before Daystar announced it publicly on social media. He was barred from speaking at her memorial service. His image did not appear in the memorial slideshow. Meanwhile, the anonymous source verified by the Roy's report, and confirmed by Jonathan and Susie, reported that Doug Weiss took Joni to Oasis of Hope Hospital in Tijuana on a Monday. Her daughters Rachel and Rebecca, on air at Daystar that same morning, appeared to have no knowledge that their mother was dying. Thursday, May 7, 2026. In her final communications, the source reported receiving a text from Joni's phone that read, "I've tried everything," language that did not sound like Joni's voice, and which the source attributed to Doug managing Joni's phone. Against that backdrop, Joni Lamb's estate decisions in the final months of her life tell a coherent story. She sold 3 properties. She moved 4 into a revocable trust. She removed Doug Weiss's name from the Florida condominium. She did not name him as a beneficiary in the trust, according to the reporting available. She told a board member, reportedly in tears, that if Jonathan reached out, he should be given Daystar back. A woman who knew what she was doing, who had built and sustained a $2.90 billion reach television network for 30 years, who had survived public scandal before, and who understood legal and financial instruments, was putting her house in order. And the shape she was putting it in excluded the man she had married. What we know and what remains open. The record is clear on the following. Joni Lamb removed Doug Weiss from the title of the $2.9 million Miramar Beach condominium in March 2026, approximately 8 weeks before her death. He agreed to the transfer. The property was placed in her personal revocable trust. Doug Weiss received no assets from her estate under the documented trust structure. He was subsequently removed from Daystar's programming lineup after her death. He posted a brief Facebook tribute on June 8, 2026, and has said nothing publicly about the Mexico trip, the quitclaim deed, the phone, or the family's estrangement. What remains genuinely open are the reasons. We do not know whether Joni removed his name at her own initiative, under family or legal counsel's advice, or as part of a broader reassessment of the marriage in her final months. We do not know what Joni told Doug when they both signed that deed. We do not know what the prenup said, or whether its terms governed the transfer. What we know is that a woman with decades of institutional experience, significant legal and financial resources, and access to sophisticated counsel, a woman who was simultaneously managing a terminal illness, an estranged son, and a ministry facing a governance crisis, made a deliberate legal decision to remove her husband from a major asset and place it under her exclusive control before she died. That decision is documented. It is in the public record. It does not require interpretation to be significant. Joni Lamb's final months produced a trail of documented decisions: property sales, trust transfers, a quitclaim deed, a reported dying wish, and a funeral that excluded the son both she and her late husband had named as their successor. The full meaning of those decisions belongs to the family, to the institution, and to the God whose name Daystar has carried for 30 years. But the documents are public. The record is there for anyone who wants to look at it honestly. Subscribe if you're new to this series. Everything discussed today is sourced in full below. The record on Joni Lamb's estate restructuring, Doug Weiss's professional history, and Daystar's financial opacity is now extensive enough that the only remaining question is what the institution decides to do with the truth it has been handed.